Previously on the No Nay Never podcast.
Manchester City versus Arsenal has been postponed tonight because of coronavirus fears, but that seems to be a one-off.
We've had difficult times at Manchester City.
Well, business as usual in the Premier League.
The game of football is never going to be as important as people's lives.
It's going to be a really, really tough game on Saturday.
Until next time. Hello and welcome back to the No Nay Never podcast. I'm your host Natalie Bromley, and joining me for this very special end of season preview is pretty much the entire panel. The Football League is back. It's the No Nay Never podcast. Goodness me, listeners, it's been a while. We have been absent from your podcast provider for quite some time, and I think it's pretty clear as to why. Of course, we have all been having to live through a very strange 13 weeks, however long it's been, because as we all know, since the 23rd of March this year, the UK has been on lockdown owing to the coronavirus pandemic known as COVID-19. It's taken hold of the UK. Football was suspended. Pretty much everything was suspended and has been for quite some time while we've all been learning how to do Zoom calls at home and quizzes with family and learning a new term of social distancing, which I don't think any of us really knew what that was before coronavirus took hold. But we're back. We are back. We're having a bit of an end of season preview. But I'm going to start this podcast obviously by addressing the far more important factor that's going on in the world right now than football. As of recording today, there's been just under 300,000 confirmed cases of coronavirus in the UK, with just under 42,000 deaths from that horrible disease. So we open by wishing you all safety and health. We hope that you, your families, and your loved ones are all staying safe and well. And of course, our thoughts and prayers are with anybody who has lost anybody throughout this pandemic. There is light at the end of the tunnel. It looks like we're coming to the end of it, slowly but surely. And as a result, football is back. The Premier League have announced that the remaining 90 games will commence on the 17th of June, with the mighty Clarets opening their end of season campaign away at Manchester City on Monday. Is it Monday the 22nd of June? Now, football is very, very important. It's important to all of us. It's the national sport and it's back. And we got the panel together to start having a look at what's been going on over the months and take a look forward to basically the last games of the season. So joining me this week is starting off with Tom Whittaker. Tom, what have you missed? Well, what have you missed most about football in this past few months?
Hi, Natalie. Apart from the obvious recording the podcast, I think for me, the thing I miss most about going up is it's not just the 90 minutes itself, it's not just the match, it's everything around it. So I live in Derby. I've got family in the Northwest, which is why I'm a Burnley fan, and that's the only time that really I see a lot of the people that I know in the Northwest. Got friends up there, got family, and often the match day, as well as going to the game, as well as the 90 minutes, it's a couple of pints with your mates before the game. It's calling in and seeing family members after. So that kind of routine that you've got every other Saturday of the journey of your whole day being taken up by the football, suddenly I've got all this time on my hands, and yeah, it's been strange. I've missed it a lot. I'm looking forward to going back as and when it's safe to do so.
Yeah, definitely. So also joining us is everyone's favourite Wiganer, Richard Steele. Richard, how have you been and what have you missed most?
Hi Natalie, thanks for having me back on. Yeah, I'll probably say what Tom said before. It's not just the 90 minutes that you miss. It's everything around the game. as you said, I'm not from Burnley, from Wigan. So it's kind of just going the game with my dad, really, that I've missed more than anything. We always kind of get there a little bit earlier. We go in the foundation lounge for a couple of pints, watch the game before. So yeah, I actually think that's probably the thing I've missed the most. And also kind of when you work during the week and you're winding down, and then you look forward to your game on the Saturday or the Sunday or whenever it might be, and you've not got that game to look forward to. So yeah, just that, and I've even just missed the ups and downs of it. Obviously, some games you win, some games you lose. But I've just kind of missed that thrill, really. So really, really looking forward to having it back. It won't be the same not being able to go on the turf, obviously. So I think the home games will be a little bit more strange than the away games, but it's definitely better than not having it on at all.
Yeah, I think you're right, Richard, and obviously we'll come on to that when we start looking at what the options were for Project Restart. But making up our panel this week is, of course, our resident student and eternal optimist, George Poole. George, what on earth have you been up to and what have you missed about the football?
Hi guys, good to be chatting with you all. I think the thing I've missed most about football is it's made me realise how much I missed going to away games, for sure, because obviously being my first year at uni, I've not been able to go to many, and sort of having all that uni life, you don't realise at the time how much you missed it. And then I think coming home, obviously being sent home with the lockdown and everything shuts down, and it's just made me realise there's been that massive hole in my life for this past year, where for the past 4 or 5 years I've been going, every Saturday, whether it's home or away, and then now it's in the past year, all of a sudden it's watching games on TV every Saturday, and it's just not the same. And it's definitely made me realise that I've missed that a lot in the past year. So I mean, goodness knows if we'll be getting back to stadium football anytime soon, but whenever that does happen, I'll be definitely making sure to get to more games now my first year's over with. But yeah, lockdown's just been ticking along, and it's sort of got back to normal for me in the past week or so because I've gone back to work at KFC, so back to normality for me, unfortunately.
Definitely one of our absolute heroes. I'm pretty sure that wherever you are in the UK, the queues for KFC and McDonald's when they opened this week was phenomenal. So George, on behalf of my terrible diet, thank you for going back to work this early because it saved me for the last week. I think I echo all of your thoughts. For me, I think I realised that football is just such a social interaction. I've missed terribly the people who I sit with around at turf, and like you say, that match day routine. And for me, it's been my dad. My dad's over 70, and he was sent a letter in the first week of lockdown from the government to say that he had to shield. He was in a vulnerable category. So I haven't seen my dad for 14 weeks, and the football is a big part of that. He lives about 30 miles away from me, so yeah, I've not been able to see him until this weekend has just passed, and the travel restrictions have gone. So yeah, I imagine that's been a really difficult bit. And Tom, going back to you, I think one of the things that really helped with that in the early stages of lockdown, and what was recognised by the club in terms of such an important part it played in the community was some of the efforts that the club went to get in touch with vulnerable fans. If you remember rightly, that there was quite a lot of negative press at the outset, with some politicians getting on footballers' backs and saying that they should be donating salaries and cutting salaries and things like that. But the Burnley did quite a lot, didn't they, in the early stages to keep the community involved? You could talk us through some of the few things that they were doing.
Yeah, I think one that leaps out at me straight away is the food banks. That's something that I try and bring some tins, for the bins outside the ground for every home game, and obviously with that suddenly disappearing, there's a big hole to fill. And I know the players donated a lot of money towards that, and the club were really good about proactively pushing donations for that as well. It's really encouraging to see. They've used the turf for coronavirus testing. Again, that's something that they don't have to do. Being proactive, helping the community, taking a bit of the pressure off the NHS. And then, like you say, the phone calls as well. It must be something that's really nice for people who perhaps, like say, a lot of the social life does revolve around the football. A lot of it can just drop off if you don't have that 90 minutes on the Saturday and that time around the game. So to know that that the club have thought about you and are reaching back out to you, and obviously not just people at the club but the players, it must have been a real boost. I think a lot of the work that the club's done in terms of kind of keeping that match day feel, the stuff they've had on the socials when they've been playing back those full 90-minute games. Speaking obviously as I say, someone who doesn't live in Burnley, I have felt really connected to the club and closer to the club than I perhaps expected to feel during this 12 weeks. And I think the social team, the team off the pitch at Burnley, should really be commended for all the work they've done. I think they have done a really good job.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's probably unsurprising to those of us who followed the club over the years. It's, you see all of the good messages, and I'm sure a lot of the clubs are the same, but Burnley genuinely is a community town, and we've been doing things like this for a long time and really looking after our own. Richard, I just want to come to you next because Tom's just reminded me then of one of the things that the club did to keep everybody connected during lockdown, and I know you were particularly a big fan of this, was the match history and replaying old classic matches and back to the fixtures and things like that. That really did help keep us going, wasn't it, with our football fix?
Yeah, like Tom was saying, I think the club's been really proactive on social media, and I think this time for me of having kind of like no football at all is really, it's been a real reflection of looking back on what we've achieved, especially under this Sean Dyche era. Because normally, even when it's pre-season, you get preoccupied with transfers. Who are we going to sign? Who are we not going to sign? So I think this period has just been a really good opportunity to take stock, look back on previous games, and actually think, you know what, we should be really proud of everything that we've achieved over these last, 7-8 years under Dyche. Some of the highlights for me was going back, even watching that Crystal Palace away game, our first win in the Premier League away from home that season, and then actually just last week, because this is how sad I am, I actually went back and watched the season review for when we come seventh, and then last season, even though we struggled, just like I said, really enjoyable memories. And yeah, just let's hope some more of them can continue. And what was quite special for me over this time, I wasn't born at the time, but family members talk about it, is the Leyton Orient game, and obviously even people who was born after that game know the magnitude of it. So, to go back and watch that full game and then just see the sheer emotion, and kind of that was a turning point for the club, that Leyton Orient game happened, and then slowly and steadily we've built up everything we are, and looking at us now, we're in a really strong position to hopefully come in the top half of the Premier League again.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely been a time for reflection for me as well. I think I've had a funny relationship actually with football since we started. I think, as I said in my intro, clearly there's been other things going on, and football went from being that week when, if you remember, there was the FA were umming and ahhing as to whether or not they were going to suspend the leagues or not, and then there was a spate of loads of players who tested positive, and actually the Arsenal manager as well got tested positive as well. And then at the time we were all absolutely distraught, but then very quickly football kind of fell down to the bottom of the priority list when I think we all realised just how serious this was. I've got to say, I have enjoyed I've enjoyed the break from football in that I realised in this lockdown period just how all-encompassing it's been in my life, and that's made me realise just how much I love football, if that makes sense. It's like I've enjoyed the break, but I think because I just get so wrapped up in it during the season and I live and breathe it and I'm always thinking about it, it made me realise just what a massive part of my life it is. So yeah, it's been a nice break, but I am definitely itching to get back. George, let's move on then, because let's have a look at where we got to, because of course, as we were in lockdown and plans were being put in place to get the country going again and to start making plans to ease in the lockdown restrictions in the UK, the Premier League launched what was Project Restart, was how they were going to get, if they could, the remaining 90 games played to the end of the season. Now, we had so many options: play, don't play, play at neutral venues, points per game ratio. If I can put you back into the mindset before a decision was made, George, what did you feel about, let's start with voiding the season. So let's say two options: voiding the season completely or voiding it and issuing places on points per game. What were your views on those a few weeks ago?
Yeah, it's really weird looking back and thinking what I thought back then, because now all of a sudden we're 2 days away from the Premier League restarting, and yet it only feels like a month ago that I was fully in favour of just completely voiding the season, stopping the season, doing it on a points per game basis. I just thought that was the most sensible option. You know, there's far bigger things in the world at the moment than football. If it's not going to be safe, we had all them initial tests. It seemed like the numbers of cases were rising and rising. I just thought, you know what, football needs to be on the back burner for now. Let's just scrap this season. It's not going to be the same either way without fans anyway. So let's do it on a points per game basis. I think maybe half of that is the fact that we're in 10th. Maybe, you know, we've not got much to play for. Yeah, okay, we could go on a run and finish higher up the league, but there's no worst case scenario for us. So on a points per game, I think on all the different calculations, we were going to come 10th. So I think that maybe that helped me get that mindset. But now all of a sudden we're getting back to the season, and it seems like it's come out of nowhere at the time. But if you actually look at the French league, the French top league, they voided their season almost straight away as all these talks were beginning. And you've got to say, I mean, with the benefit of hindsight, they're looking a bit silly right now. The integrity of their leagues, you know, which was already in doubt, let's be honest, it's looking a bit shaky as the Bundesliga's come back. The Premier League's returning this week. La Liga returned last week. Now everyone's sort of looking at the French league as the anomaly, whereas we're all getting back to you know, the new normal. So I think really the Premier League have got to be credited, because there was lots of people like me just making quick judgments saying let's scrap it now, points per game. But they did well to wait it out. They didn't rush any decisions. They realised this was a long-term process, and now we're 2 days away from playing what we all hope and what we all think are going to be safe games behind closed doors. People are going to be able to watch, I think it's all of the fixtures on TV, and I think they've really got to be credited because they've done a fantastic job of just waiting it out, and now we're going to get football back in its sort of new form. So yeah, I've completely changed my mind from the beginning, and I'm all for the restart now as long as it's safe, which it seems to be.
Yeah, that is an absolutely hilarious point, is that, George, actually. And this is something that I definitely thought during lockdown. I was very aware of how much I didn't care about whether it was voided or whether we found a way to play it. Basically, because we knew we were going to finish around 10th, we were safe. And I was starting to get very aware of how much more I would care if I was in Villa's position or West Ham's position or Watford's position, for example. It definitely made a big difference. Tom, I think the way I'd got with this is, I completely ruled out the points per game system. And to me, it felt like the only fair way that we could get the Premier League going was either void it completely and the season is just scrapped, as in, no, you know, we all start again next season as we did at the beginning of this season, or we find a way to play it through to the end. I think for me it had to be one or the other. I was absolutely certain that's where I'd got to. I just couldn't see how a points per game system, so you could award promotion, relegation. And I'll tell you what else there was as well that was talked about at one point, this idea of West Brom and Leeds come up from the Championship, so we have 5 relegated next season and things like that. To me, it was always void and scrap it or played out to natural conclusion. Did you ever feel differently?
God, it's stressful enough having 3 teams relegated, isn't it? I don't think I could be doing with 5 next season. I was... I mean, it's been hard to keep track, hasn't it? Like George said, it's all changed so quickly. You know, it seemed like a month ago that the only possibility was to avoid it all. And I think points per game, I can see the argument behind it, because if it's going to cost clubs money to finish the season, or if it's not safe to finish it, perhaps it's a slightly more satisfying conclusion than just voiding the whole thing. You've seen in the very lowest non-league tiers, I know their seasons were just voided. And there's some teams who are like in top of the league by 20 points who've had it voided. And it's not really fair on them. But then equally, you've seen in League One last week, they went for the PPG. Tranmere have been relegated by 0.04 of a point or something crazy like that. You've got the problem in the Conference North at the minute where they're deciding at the minute they're only going to promote one team. You've got York City, who've been top for the last 3 months. And as it stands, Kings Lynn are going to get the promotion place because they've got 2 games in hand and their PPG takes them just above York. So things like that, it's hard to see how you could have a satisfying conclusion without at least making the attempt to play out on the pitch. And I think with the money that's in the Premier League, the increased scrutiny that's on the Premier League, I think it would have taken a really impossible situation. It would have been a situation where we were in lockdown for months and months, and there was just no feasibility of playing the games to have got to a point where you were going to do PPG. And I think a big problem with doing that in the Premier League as well would have been the fact that Liverpool are so far clear. I mentioned then about some teams in the Northern Premier League and divisions like that were far ahead at the top. I think if you'd avoided that title from Liverpool, that it would have been really, really unfair, given that they're so close to it. So I think from that point of view as well, you had if it was a situation where perhaps we were halfway through the season and it was a bit more evenly balanced, then you perhaps there wouldn't be as much to lose out on for teams who are near the top of the league. But to avoid it, and even for a team like Sheffield United, who's got a chance of being in Europe for the first time ever, that would have been a kick in the teeth for them. West Brom and Leeds as well, you've got an inevitable legal challenge if you're denying them the chance to pick up the £100 million check next season. I think the only teams that are really seriously talking about avoiding it were teams like West Ham and Norwich, who are basically just saying that because they don't want to get relegated at the end of the day. So yeah, I think there's no ideal solution, because, as I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit more detail about later on, I don't think that even playing the games in the manner in which we're going to have to play them is an ideal solution. But I think given that we weren't going to get a great finish to this season, playing the games out behind closed doors is the best of the options that we could have had. So I'm glad that we have been able to settle on that in the end.
Yeah, it's definitely been a factor, I think, that Liverpool was so close to getting this historic Premier League win. And I don't mean to suggest that this has all been about Liverpool. Of course it's not. But I've often thought during some of the really heavy debates where they were discussing, all of these points per games and 5 up, 3, 3 up, 5 down, whatever it was that they were going to do, I found myself saying so many times, do you know what? If the Premier League title was really close, or let's say it was City who were miles ahead and they were reigning champions or something like that, I genuinely felt that it wouldn't be as I guess emotive a debate. People wouldn't have cared as much. It definitely felt like the Liverpool factor definitely pushed people towards wanting to get us up and running. I completely agree with you, Tom. I just, for me, there were so many just variables and so many teams that could be really hard done by just trying to award points on this points per game and things like this. It just felt to me that it had to be either void or played out. It was very it's been very difficult, and like George said earlier, they've done well to get to this stage. Richard, with that in mind, are you happy with what we've ended up with? So of course we're back and it's pretty much business as usual, except for no fans in the stadium. Are you happy with that result in the end?
Like you were saying there, just had a conversation between yourself, George, and Tom, and all the different, or what it could have been with points per game, void, and I think each of those scenarios, there's going to be people who are pro and people who are against it because of how fair it is. So for me, I think, you've got people slag off, the Premier League, etc., for what it is, but you've got to give a lot of credit and show a lot of time and a lot of effort has been put on to get the games going. And if the players and the managers didn't feel it was going to be safe, then they wouldn't go and play in it. That's my view on it. So I think this is 100% the fairest way to do it. It's not an ideal way. Obviously, we'd love to be in the stadium, but I think that's going to be some way off until we get that. So yeah, for me, it's 100% the fair way to do it. You're going to get a clear winner at the end of the season, which is going to be Liverpool anyway. But they'll almost do it more on merit. Now you'll get your clear relegation. It's going to be interesting how it will affect the home and away performance. I think I seen a stat the other day where it's something like only 20% of teams have actually won at home playing in the Bundesliga compared to 40% when there was actually crowds. So I actually think this may benefit the away teams, but the home teams. I know it's something that will affect us not playing at Turf Moor. But then alternatively, going away to City, will it help us with no fans?
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be a really interesting aspect of it to see how it does make a difference. And one thing that I was against at first was the crowd noise. But I'm really into my rugby league, and I was watching the NRL down in Australia, and they had the fan noise, and I thought it worked. And then the Bundesliga has implemented it over the last couple of weekends, and for me, it definitely makes it a little better. I thought it was going to be cringy, but for me, if you can have that crowd noise still coming through the telly, I think it'll add more atmosphere to the game. And just the last point I'll make it's going to be interesting to actually see what the tempo's like. From watching the first weekend of the Bundesliga, it was quite slow. And then I watched the Leverkusen Schalke, the second half of that, where the teams had both had something to play for, and the intensity was really good, and it was a really good game. You wouldn't have thought it was any different to any normal game. So I think it might be a little bit slow to get off and running, maybe due to players getting used to it, the fitness, etc. But I think as it goes on and the players get used to it, I think it'll just become the norm.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Richard. And Dash himself has come out and said that there's going to be some freaky results, isn't there, in the first couple of weeks. If the games are that thick and fast, the first week, which is probably about 3 weeks worth of games, there's definitely going to be some strange results. I'm certainly not as worried about going to the Etihad as I usually am. But then, as Richard quite rightly said, the home advantage can be massive. And I wonder how, George, this is going to affect the relegation threatened sides. Now, I think for the first time in, God, as long as I can remember, possibly even the first time in the Premier League, to me, it's going to be the relegation threatened sides and the teams like the 6 pointers down at the bottom that are going to be the games that are going to get people interested. And I say this without being disrespectful to Liverpool, but nobody really cares about Liverpool because they've won the league. It's like Liverpool fans, yes, of course it's going to be their moment to get crowned champions. But for the rest of the football fans across the country, it's very, meh. Liverpool have won the league, let's just get that over and done with. I don't think there's a massive amount of excitement around the top 4 places and the top 6 places, mainly because the remaining top, the usual top 6 sides have been pretty dull this year. There's been quite a lot of quite boring football played from them. So there isn't the same level of excitement to the top 4. And, we know ourselves, nobody likes us, but are people really going to get that excited about the race for 7th or possibly 8th place, depending on City's appeal? When it's the likes of Wolves or Sheffield United or Burnley who are trying to get a Europa place, people aren't going to get that interested. So for me, George, it's going to be the relegation threatened side that's going to spark the interest in these televised games. And bearing in mind everything that Rich has just said, do you think that these teams are going to be able to get themselves up for this relegation challenge after, number one, this break, and number two, with their own fans not behind them?
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree. It's going to be the most exciting games to watch for sure. I mean, Liverpool, the title's theirs already. Let's be honest, no one really cares until they actually pick it up. The only thing with the 4th place is, if Sheffield United mount a charge, then that'll be, a nice little story if they can get Champions League football. I mean, wow, that'd be amazing. But let's be honest, the story is all in the relegation battle. And the thing I didn't realise until... And this is a good thing. The thing I didn't realise until today when I was looking at the table is I'd not been even taking notes of the relegation battle at all. We have been so comfortable this season. And I think it's probably, apart from the 7th season, it's the only season in the Prem where I've never actually... You don't have to keep up with the relegation battle because it's just not of interest anymore. But looking at the table, some of the teams that can go down, there's some big teams that, it's a big story if they go down. West Ham... I mean, I saw a stat today, they spent something like 300 million in the last two and a half years. Watford, again, a team that you'd think, after a couple of years of yo-yoing, they're sort of an established Premier League team now. Bournemouth, if they went down, I mean, it's probably bigger news for us than most football fans because of the Eddie Howe link, but that's a big story. And there was I saw they're the team with the highest percentage of their revenue comes from the broadcasting from the Premier League. So I know they've got a rich owner and everything, but it won't be good news for them if they do get relegated and lose that massive money in the TV deals. So there's real interest at the bottom, and it's so tight as well. I mean, you've got Aston Villa on 25 points, with a game in hand. So if they win, they get out of the relegation zone. Obviously, Norwich, we'll talk about Norwich. They're practically down with a tough fixture list. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing the relegation battle. And I think with all the games being streamed on TV one way or the other, it'll make for a really interesting end to the season.
Yeah, definitely. I did wonder how they were going to do this broadcasting deal, because obviously usually there's quite a lot of money involved. Well, there's quite a lot of money. Is that the understatement of the year? There's obviously a lot of money involved in the Premier League, and those broadcasters who have Premier League rights are usually very, very savvy and very strict with what they will and won't allow to be shared. I think, Tom, one of the things that worried us halfway through the season is, do you remember about halfway through lockdown when out of nowhere Mike Garlick came out and said that Burnley were going to lose 50 million in revenue if the season didn't finish? I don't know about you, but my heart just fell to the floor. That was horrendous.
I think it was reported in a slightly mischievous way, because I think what he said was, if there's no football until August or something, then we'll have a 50 million, black hole in the finances, which is true for every club. And I think in terms of the clubs who are best placed to absorb, that loss, I think we must be one of the teams who's got the most cash in the bank, as it were. Obviously, there's a lot of talk of perhaps they'll relax or even suspend the FFP regulations just for this season, so that clubs owners can cover the costs of what they'll be missing with the coronavirus a bit. But I think every club's acknowledging that this summer the transfer market isn't going to be what it has been in recent years. Man United have said they're going to lose. They've already lost about £30 million, I think, and it's only going to go up. I think we'll have to pay a certain amount of money back to Sky, is my understanding, because the product that they'll be getting is not quite what they paid for. But I think in terms of that revenue, we run a tight ship anyway. We're making a profit every year, and the fact that we don't rely that much on match day income as well is a bit of a boost. So, like, obviously Manchester United with the 76,000 sellout crowd every week, loads of corporate money coming in and that kind of thing. We sell out most of the stadium every week, but the sort of 20,000 every other week is not as big a proportion of our income as it is for other clubs. So from that sense, really, as long as the TV money doesn't take too much of a hit, I think financially we're in a good position. And probably not something that the board foresaw, but obviously there's been a lot of talk in recent years as the amount of money we have held back and that we haven't necessarily reinvested on the pitch. But there's always the possibility that a rainy day might come in some form or other. And at the minute, I think it's looking like it's probably quite prudent management overall from the board. I think in terms of the 91 Football League clubs will come out of this as one of the best placed, definitely.
I'm sorry, I've been trying my best to hold my laughing all the way through that. Just the fact that Burnley have been holding back monies for a rainy day. And it's like, I could just imagine Mike Garlick, because of a global pandemic, like, see lads, I told you that rainy day money had come in handy. I know I shouldn't jest about these things, but just the way that you deadpanned that then was very amusing. Just keeping on that thread about certainly about income and things like that, we don't often like to give them airtime unless we are taking the mickey, but I did have some sympathy this week, only a very small amount I had, for our neighbours down the road. Of course, the headlines were being grabbed that Blackburn Rovers are not offered. Oh God, it feels dirty saying that. But this is a family-friendly show and I can't give them their full title. They aren't able to offer any refunds whatsoever. And I've had so many messages and tweets from non-Burnley fans who sent me that thing just thinking that I would find it hilarious. But actually, I did the maths very quickly in my head, and Championship ticket prices are actually really expensive because they don't have the cap that the Premier League brought in. And if you work out, I think Blackburn this season sold around 7,000 season tickets. And if you sort of average that out between all tiers of tickets and all levels from juniors right up to all the the discounted tickets as well, if you apply just an average £25 a ticket, with their 4 remaining games left, that meant they would have to find £700,000 just to refund season ticket holders for their remaining 4 games. And you look at Championship clubs now and you think, well, they've got the bad press from it, but I'm not sure that many Championship clubs would have that amount of cash around to be able to refund fans. And I know it's hard because the whole country's struggling under this virus. People have lost their jobs. Of course they are, but it's difficult. It just goes to show how important it is that a football club is well managed, because it highlights more than anything that clubs are basically running on overdrafts. They don't have money, and something like this happens, they can't deal with it. Richard, very quickly before we come on to what I do want to talk to you about, did you get a chance to see the new chief exec's interview, Neil Hart, this week that went up on the website? I think that's the first time we've heard from him since because I think he got brought in, didn't he, like a week before we went into lockdown. And he gave quite a decent interview about what good shape we were in and what we want to do for the next few years. Did you have a chance to look at that?
Yeah, I did have a look over it, and it comes across quite impressive to me. I think he's obviously done great stuff with the community. With the community side of it, it seemed a sensible decision to move him across, into this role. And I think it was said, obviously we've got to be realistic, which we heard before. But he also said that, we're looking to be active in the transfer window, which was definitely a positive. I think, Tom really summed that up really well to me about that interview that Mike Garlick did. When you read the interview properly, it was just a sensible article that obviously some, national rags got hold of, sensationalised it, and made it sound just way worse than it was. And there's going to be so many teams who, for me, are going to come out worse than this. We're not going to come out and be able to spend, lots of money on players. We've not been able to do that in the past, but I still think we're going to be in a good position. I don't expect us to be in a position where we're going to have to sell loads of players. So, yeah, really, really positive from Neil Hart, I thought, and I think he's going to look to be a good appointment. His interview was really positive about where the club are at the moment, and then what we can achieve, and then moving into next season.
Yeah, I agree. George, just picking up on what Richard just said there, he's talking about how we are looking to be active in the transfer market. We've already triggered an extension on Robbie Brady's contract, which I think was the right thing to do. We'll look at that later on, maybe next week when we start to look at how the season finishes and plans for the summer. But surely this is going to have a huge impact on summer business. Or actually, do you think it will? Do you think it'll just be business as usual?
I think it's one of them where we don't know what's going to happen. We didn't know what was going to happen with coronavirus. We don't know what's going to happen with this. The thing that I was sort of worried most about, but there's not been any rumours. I mean, I'd take of that what you will. But the Dwight McNeil situation, before all this happened, I'd have expected us to have finished the season and probably sold him this summer. He's had a good 1.5 years with us. And then when this sort of started to come about, and you have all we're losing this 50 million money, and I'm thinking, oh no, we're gonna be losing Dwight in the transfer window on, for quite a cut down price, other than what we could have got in a normal situation. But you just don't know. I've seen the other day that they're at least moving the summer transfer window, I believe, to October, provisionally. And there's been rulings done by FIFA, I think, who've said, seasons can start now before transfer windows have ended. And, there's all these implications to think about. I think we'll definitely be one of the sides that sort of keeps our powder dry, definitely. I mean, as per usual, but even more so, you'd expect, we won't have that much cash to splash around now. I'm really glad we got Brownhill in January, because that's a position that would have been needed. And we've got him on a really good deal before all this popped up. And I think it will be just interesting to see what we do with contracts. Like, if we let Hendrick and Bardsley, etc. go, then we'll have to replace them. But yeah, I don't expect us to be spending much in the transfer window whenever it happens. We just need to make sure we've got a squad to stay up, because next year is going to be an anomaly year and an anomalous transfer window as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think I do like Hendrick, and I think as a utility player he's great, but I completely understand his frustration. He's never been able to cement his place in the side. He's never been able to get himself on board. So many fans hate him, which I just don't understand. But, everybody's views it is their own. But I think securing some of those players now as squad players is really important. I would just like to give a very quick shout out right now to Dwight McNeil's dad, who's been in the press this week, is basically saying that Dwight McNeil needs to not get his head turned by these big clubs and stay where he is at Burnley. And I'm just like, bravo, that man. Can we just get him like the freedom of Burnley, please? That would be great. Richard, sorry, I got sidetracked then talking about money and going to George to get that. But one thing I did want to speak to you about, which is one thing I'm finding really interesting. This is all really great, really positive, fantastic. We're going back to Premier League. We're going to finish the season, integrity of the competition, tick, all done. There is a rather obvious flaw in the plan. What happens if first game Watford win? No, let's not use Watford as an example. Let's use Villa. So let's say Villa win their first game, so they pull themselves out at relegation places, and it's theirs to lose essentially, and they can, they're out of the bottom three and they can go on. After that first game, Jack Grealish gets tested positive for coronavirus and either gets poorly or has come into contact with people, and some of their team have to go into quarantine or self-isolation and can't play 2 of the games, which they both lose and get themselves back in. That is just one example. What are we going to do if the pandemic takes a hold of the players?
It's a really difficult question, isn't it? It's kind of been a little bit out of my remit with the football side of it, but the only thing I can think of is it depends what stance you take of it. Do you look at it and go, have the Premier League kind of agreed with the clubs that, listen, if you have a player and he's got to self-isolate for 2 and he misses 2 games, then that's so be it. It's only the same as getting an ACL injury, or is there kind of something put in place where they say, go back to Villa where there's multiple players who have to self-isolate and staff, and their games are postponed until a later date, and then obviously that brings into the different side of it about teams finishing at the same time, for all sorts of different reasons based on how fair it is. So yeah, to answer your question, I never really thought about that, to be honest. The question comes as a bit of a shock to me.
Sorry.
To me, again, this is my view. People probably agree with it. I'll stick with my initial view and just say that, injuries happen throughout the season. And it's one of them. It's tough. But you know what I'll say about all these teams at the bottom, whinging about coming back again? They shouldn't have been so crap for over 3 quarters of a season, and then they wouldn't have been worrying about it, would they? So you've got all these Villa fans going on about it should be void and everything, but at the end of the day, they've spent 100 million and they're still doing rubbish. So it's their fault, innit, at the end of the day, for being so poor.
That may very well be my favourite all-time line from a NNN Ever podcast. It's they shouldn't have been so crap, should they? That is absolutely brilliant. Listen, Rich, I'm sorry I did throw that curveball at you then, because it was when we were talking about that, it just entered my head and I was starting to think, hang on a minute, what happens here? For what it's worth, I asked it you because I don't know the answer either, and I think way smarter people than me also wouldn't know what the answer is here. But it's just, I think what you said then was actually probably one of the best answers that I could think of for this, in that, well, actually, if somebody does catch this and has to self-isolate for 7 days, they miss 2, maybe 3 games, what is the difference between that and pulling a hamstring or going over on their ankle or pulling a groin or something like that? You are right. They are, what's the word? It's part and parcel of the game, isn't it, these injuries? And I know it's different, and I know these are special circumstances, and I know there is a greater concern with this virus in terms of people's health. But from a football integrity perspective, then yeah, I think that's a really good point, and it's not one that I'd thought of. What about not Richard, Tom, George? Do you know what? I've got your 3 names on the screen, and I just keep forgetting which order I've done them in. Tom, on the flip side of that, talking about health, where do you stand on players who refuse to play? There are some players who have refused to come back to training or have refused to play in these early stages, particularly while the UK death toll was still quite high. Where do you stand with that?
Yeah, I wouldn't have a problem with any of our players who felt that it wasn't safe for them to return, because at the end of the day, you don't know what people's individual circumstances are. I mean, me myself, I work for the NHS, so I've been at work since this started. But we've got people in our office who either they're shielding or the partners are shielding. They're working from home. It's down to your personal circumstances at the end of the day. If we've got players who live with elderly relatives, if they've got young children, I think Troy Deeney was the example in the press because his young son has got breathing difficulties. if he doesn't feel that it's a safe environment for him to go and play, then you can't argue with that for me. But having said that, I do think that the example from the Bundesliga about how sort of tightly controlled it's all been, the fact that they're getting so much testing, I think it's probably a safer environment than your average work environment, to be honest. And I think it's likely that even if they don't come back for the first week or two, I think if it runs successfully, and it looks like it will, and if it's anything like the German and to a lesser extent the Spanish models that we've seen already, it looks like it'll go off without a hitch. And I think that will persuade players to come back, even if they do stay away for the first couple of weeks. I think one kind of maybe slightly more interesting, intriguing scenario maybe is players who are coming to an end of the contract. If we're going to see any of them sort of sit out or perhaps not risk an injury. I know Lyle Taylor at Charlton isn't playing for that reason, so he's going to miss the run in. I can't see Phil Bardsley being the type of player to do that, but I do wonder if Jeff Hendrick's already got a move sorted. I wonder if we'd see him perhaps, especially with the fact that, as we've said already, we haven't got a great deal to play for, perhaps an outside chance of Europe, but other than that, we haven't got a lot to play for. So I wonder if Hendrick would maybe think, well, I've got XYZ offers on the table. Perhaps I'll sit these last 9 games out. It's not as if we're going to get relegated as a result. It'd be interesting to see what the fan reaction to that would be. I think that will probably be wildly different to him saying that he wasn't going to play because he was worried about the health implications of catching the virus. And I'd also love to see him have that conversation with Sean Dyche.
Oh God, can you? Although you say that, I'm not entirely sure that he would be. Would he be? How would John? I don't know how Dyche would react. He's quite a family man and he's quite level-headed. He's Dyche, isn't he? I think he's quite open about how football isn't everything. Bless him. Okay, let's move away from what Project Restart and actually let's have a look at restarting the league. George, we actually start playing again on Monday, so we are building up to City away on Monday. So we're one of the last teams to play. Actually, are we? I'm not really sure we are. Maybe we start on Monday. I can't remember. I haven't even looked at the fixtures properly yet. But we start playing on Monday, and for the first time in as long as I can remember, Dyche has got a full squad to choose from.
Yeah, it's quite a positive for us. Maybe the whole lockdown situation and everything's actually helped us. It's been like an extended break for us. Obviously, we've got a full squad available. Here's hoping. I mean, there's rumours here and there, but people like Ashley Barnes, who were before were injured. I was just listening to an interview with J-Rod the other day, and he was saying that before, obviously, the whole corona situation came about, I think he got injured in the Tottenham game and he required surgery or, some sort of extended absence. And he says he's got that all sorted and he's fit and he's raring to go again, which, is a real positive, seeing as how he was coming into his own over the sort of Christmas spell and at the start of the year. I mean, that United game, that's at the forefront of everyone's mind. So I think it'd be really positive that we can have a full squad back. Goodness knows what to expect, how they'll play, obviously the intensity we've mentioned, but you can't go wrong from a start where you've got every player fit. So it'll be interesting to see what sort of team he puts out. The striker situation that's been prevalent this season, and then also how much he uses them extra subs and if he uses them at all.
Yeah, I've got to say, Tom, I did find this absolutely hilarious when it was announced that the subs would be, I think you could have increased, you put 9 on the bench instead of 7, and you can make 5 substitutions instead of 3. I saw them, all of the Twitter posts, Tom, where basically that was just Dyche shrugging his head going, nah, do we think he's actually going to rotate these players or not?
I wouldn't imagine that he will. I think it might play in our favour with the first game, because I know Man City are playing on the Wednesday night, aren't they? And then again on the Monday, so they might rotate a few. But no, well, we haven't really got the squad to do it, have we? But even if we did, no, I can't see him making more than 1 or 2 changes for each game, and I can't see a sub before the 80th minute.
No, I do think it. But then that said, though, he hasn't had to play these games like this since our championship days, and he is going to have to think about the the health of these players. I mean, it's going to be a difficult one, but yeah, I think it'd be hilarious if Dyche starts making substitutions, then I'll know we're definitely in a weird new world. Richard, I think the biggest, I think as Tom just said then, so many positions throughout the team will stay as they are because we haven't really got the players to rotate them around. I guess the players on the wing, so you've got Brady and McNeil on the left and Gudmundsson and Lennon on the right. They probably get swapped around, I would have thought. But assuming that Woody does make it, we know that there's some rumours around his fitness. You've got 4 strikers suddenly to choose from. Richard, put you on the spot. You're Sean Dyche. Who do you start on Monday against City?
In terms of the strikers or the team overall?
No, the strikers. The 4 strikers.
I thought before we did this podcast that Wood just definitely wasn't fit, but I'm not sure now. So I think Rodriguez for me at the moment definitely starts, and like I said, Vidra scored in the game against Preston, that friendly, and he seemed, and there is fitness doubts over Wood, so I'd go with Rodriguez and Vidra. If Wood is fully fit, I probably would go for Wood and Rodriguez, just for the fact that I don't think we're going to get, we're definitely not going to get a lot of ball against City, so I think Wood probably would have been a better player to have, maybe to hit the balls into the, up to him so we can hold him up and lay it off, etc. But yeah, I think, so I've kind of contradicted myself really. So I think if Wood is fully fit, I'd go with Wood and Jay, but I think if Wood's not quite right, which the reports seem to point that way, then I would go for Jay and Vidra. But for me, really enjoyed watching Vidra in that spell. I thought, obviously, the goal at Southampton, but the home game he had against Bournemouth, and obviously that was a game where we did have a lot of attacking pressure on Bournemouth, especially in the second half. And it was really nice to see the link-up play between Rodriguez and Vidra, 2 really good technical players up front. So yeah, it's a great opportunity, hopefully, for Vidra to play a few games and hopefully hit the ground running again. I know it's not a striker, but I hope we get to see Brown will get a good few minutes as well in the run into the end of the season.
Oh, I hope he does do some rotation. There are some players like that I do want to see. And actually, one thing I can't remember where we're at in the Bardsley-Lawton rotation. I can't remember which one was out of form or which one we were now saying this week should keep his place for the rest of the season. So that'll be an interesting one. Laying it out to all 3 of you, is there, and I suspect the answer will be no, but is there anybody who's prepared to stake a claim for Ashley coming straight back into the squad now he's fit? Into the team, sorry, the starting lineup.
Again, I thought he was injured.
No, all 4 of them are fit. This is what I've read, is that he is literally, Dyche has got 0 injury worries.
Even Gudmundsson?
Huh?
Even Gudmundsson's fit?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, again.
Listen, I might be wrong, but I've read quite a lot of reports today to say that.
I'll trust you, Natalie. I'll trust you. Want to start Barnes? No. To moving on.
George, would you?
I don't think it'd be it's one of them players where he's been so good for us for so many years. It wouldn't be a surprise at all if it gets to Monday and we see Barnes and Rodriguez or Barnes and Wood starting. And just to the point, I feel like a lot of people have sort of written Barnes off for the moment, but I just have this sense that whenever he does play, he'll bag a couple of goals and start being our striker again. That's all I'm going to say. I have faith in him. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see him next Monday, but for me, Rodriguez and Wood's the starting partnership for now.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, and I don't think there's certainly no writing off of Ashley Barnes here by anybody. I think one of the things that perhaps has been a fair assessment of it, and I don't know if you would agree with this, Tom, is that whilst Barnes has made some real improvements in his technical game, when you start watching Jay and Wood up front together, there is a gulf, albeit it's smaller than it was, but there is a gulf in technical ability. And is it fair to say that we're looking for a slightly better technical footballer now with our strikers?
I think he probably gives you sort of slightly different qualities to both Rodriguez and Wood. I think he's a bit more of a bully than Wood, although Wood's improved that a lot in the last year. I think he's much more kind of physically adept now. He's better at holding off defenders, beating them up a little bit. But Barnes is more aggressive. He's more in your face. He's more needly. and I think Barnes is technically, I think he's better than Wood. He's not as good of a finisher, but necessarily he's not as much of a poacher. But I think he's got a spectacular 25-yarder in him. We've not really seen that from Wood. He's more of a penalty box striker. And Rodriguez, obviously, we know he can do that as well. The 25-yarders, the technique, but he's not as physically imposing as Barnes. So I think you've got a good blend of both their abilities there in Barnes. I think he's quite underrated technically myself. I don't think he's a million miles off Rodriguez, and for me he's better than Wood. So he's a nice option to have back. And I think perhaps as well the fact that he's played half this season not fit. I think perhaps we've took him down a peg or two in our minds because of that. But I think if we see him,
maybe
he'll be the player we know and love again.
That is a really good point, is that, Tom? I think because he's been absent for so long this season, and obviously we've had this breakdown as well, when it's that out of sight, out of mind thing, isn't it? And you think about Barnes and you always think about the caricature of Ashley Barnes, the jumping up all elbows and legs flailing and the guy who winds up the players. You see the comedy side of it, and I think we've forgotten just how much he has really improved technically, and when he was really on form before he got his hernia, was it? I think it went. He was starting to display some really, really attractive football. I'm on the other side of the fence to you, Tom. I think that Wood is a better technical footballer than Barnes, but hey ho, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. I like balance. That is what we like to bring to the podcast. I don't think we've got anything else to talk about. I'm just flicking through my notes. We've been through squad rotation, and we've been through subs, we've been through who will play. We talked about Brownhill. Hopefully he gets some things. So I don't think, unless you guys have anything else that you want to bring to the table before we wrap this up. Look at this, under an hour. I thought that tonight's podcast was going to go on for ages, but we've wrapped it up in under an hour. Does anybody have anything that they want to... Oh, George, you've come in there straight away. What do you want to add, George?
I just wanted to bring up it's such a shame for Liverpool for how they're going to win the league. And look, I'm not even trying to hide my laughter. I find it so funny. You wait all this time and then this happens when you're going to win the league. I mean, you wouldn't be able to get excited for this as a Liverpool fan, would you? I mean, you're going to win the Premier League, but gosh, this is the worst way. They're going to have no parade, no fans in the stadium. I mean, wow. If I had the option of being them and, forfeiting the title this year and taking it next year, I'd for sure be doing that.
Yeah. No, you would not.
Well, maybe I wouldn't, but I'd say it in my head, definitely.
Yeah, I think...
They're gonna break the points record, by a long way.
Yeah, they are.
But it's irrelevant. No, there's no fans in the stadium. I mean, I wouldn't want to be. Well, again, I would want to be them, but you wouldn't at this point.
George, I'm gonna rein you in a little bit here. I'm like, whoa, it's coming out. We're just applauding us for getting this wrapped under an hour and doing an efficient job. And George comes in saying he would avoid the season rather than having a Premier League title. George, no. But no, I do see your point. It is. I do feel for them. I think every single Liverpool fan will still want it. I think I would be very surprised if you had much less than 100% of fans voting to play out the season and get crowned champions rather than void it. Yes, it's not going to be the award that they wanted. And if anything, this past few months has taught us it's just how important live fans are to sport, not just football, but across the world. And across all disciplines, that's what we live for, is live sport. And I watch anything. God, I even watch third division ice hockey when I go skiing. I'll watch anything live, me, apart from cricket. I can't get into cricket. So yeah, poor Liverpool. We're gonna end the Burnley podcast with George completely slapping down Liverpool fans, which is hilarious. I think that is all we have time for this week. So I'm going to wrap it up there, and we're going to get some more podcasts out between now and the end of the season. I need to speak to Statman Dave and find out what our plans are for the preview show. One of the challenges in the next few weeks will be fixtures coming thick and fast, and by the time we record the podcast, they'll potentially be out of date already. So I suspect we'll probably have to do 2 or 3 games at a time and see where we get to. But in the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed the show. It's been very glad to be back. I was a little bit rusty at the beginning. I think I'd forgotten how to record a podcast, but it's absolutely fantastic to be able to be bringing you Clarets news and debate once again, when we thought at one point we weren't going to be able to. Stay safe, everybody. keep those rules in mind. Don't break lockdown. Don't break social distancing. Let's keep this pandemic under control and let's get to the end of this. And then let's look forward to the day that we can all meet again at Turf Moor. Thank you to my wonderful panellists, Richard, George and Tom, who I have missed immensely. Thank you to producer Matt for editing this together. I'm sure if you can find his editing tools, bless him, he's had a nice break as well. But my final thanks, as ever, go to you, the listener, for once again downloading and listening to this podcast. Your support is hugely appreciated and we would not be here without you. I have been Natalie Bromley. This has been the NNN Restart podcast. Until next time.